The world ended 3 days ago. Which, to be fair, was a bit of an inconvenience, but hardly the worst thing Australians have had to deal with. We've survived heat waves that melt your thongs into the road, petrol prices that make you question your life choices, and magpies that actively attempt murder for sport every spring. So congratulations, mate. You're still breathing. Gold star. But don't get cocky. The first 72 hours after the collapse, that's the tutorial level. Easy mode. The bit where you're coasting on panic, adrenaline, and whatever tins of baked beans you looted from the servo before some drongo with a mullet tried to stab you over a packet of shapes. The real game starts now. And it's not the glamorous action movie version of the apocalypse with explosions, heroic speeches, and conveniently timed rain. No, this is the dry, gritty, blistered version where your lips crack, your water boils itself before you even drink it, and you find yourself muttering bloody hell at least 17 times before lunch. Surviving day one is child's play. Rebuilding anything that resembles a future? That's where most people fall apart quicker than a cheap Bunnings gazebo in cyclone season. See, everyone in the prepper forum swears they've cracked the code. They brag about their bug-out bags, color-coded inventories, and 3 months of freeze-dried cottage pie like they're applying for a job in the apocalypse. But surviving on rations alone doesn't make you a rebuilder, it just makes you a hoarder with commitment issues. If you want to be here 5 years from now, still standing, still eating, still not eaten by any then, you need more than tins, tarps, and blind optimism. You need the gear that transforms you from a scavenging rat picking through the rubble to a half-decent human being capable of dragging civilization back from the grave using nothing but grit, spite, and whatever junk you managed to stash in your shed before society carked it. We're about to walk through the essentials, the real. Stockpiles, the ones that separate the, oh no, what do we do crowd, from the yeah mate, we've got this, survivors. The gear that will keep you from starving, keep you from dying of dehydration like a tourist hiking Uluru at noon, and keep you from bleeding out after some bright spark decides to test their new machete technique on a gum tree. Everything from seeds that outlive your grandkids to tools that fix your other tools to the kind of medical kit that lets you walk away from injuries that would normally send you straight to the emergency room, assuming emergency rooms still existed and weren't currently home to a feral goat colony. And before you start thinking this is going to turn into one of those boring, holier-than-thou lectures about personal responsibility and preparedness, don't worry. We're keeping this real, dark, occasionally funny. The sort of banter you'd hear at a pub after 3 beers and a life-altering dust storm. Because if you can't laugh at the end of the world, then mate, you're going to have a rough time. Let's kick things off with the foundational pillar of not dying. Calories. Proper, durable, no-nonsense fuel. Forget your cute canned peaches and those bougie, freeze-dried meals marketed to hikers who have never seen dirt. We're talking industrial-grade, decades-long, apocalypse-proof storage. The kind grandparents leave to grandkids because the stuff just refuses to die. White rice, dried beans, wheat berries, honey that lasts longer than most marriages, and salt, the same mineral that's been currency, preservative, and the cause of more wars than anyone likes to admit. Now, before you go grabbing brown rice because it's healthier, let's stop you there. Brown rice spoils. White rice doesn't. Why? Science, mate. Oils in the bran layer oxidize. Oxidation turns food rancid. Rancid food turns you into fertilizer. White rice is nothing but stripped, boring, bland, starchy, goodness perfect for long-term storage, terrible for Instagram. Properly packed in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and sealed in buckets you stole from behind the bakery, white rice will outlast you, your kids, and probably whatever mutant wildlife has evolved by year 30. Same goes for beans. They're the protein to your rice's carbs. Together, they form all 9 essential amino acids, basically the nutritional equivalent of 2 bogans who individually can't do much, but together can push a car out of a ditch. Calories are the real currency now, and you'll need about 730,000 of them per person per year. Sounds like a lot? It is. But you know what's more inconvenient? Starving to death. Or worse, getting so hungry you start considering eating a huntsman for extra protein. Don't do that. They look at you like they know things. Stock your food, store it properly, and remember, when you've been living off canned spaghetti for 11 months, that dusty bucket of rice will taste like hope, right? You've got your calorie fortress sorted stacks of rice, beans, wheat, and whatever else you manage to squirrel away without attracting every desperate drongo within a 5-kilometer radius. Good on you. But unless you plan on eating nothing but reheated apocalypse risotto until the sun burns out, you're gonna need something a bit more sustainable. Something that grows. Something that doesn't rely on raiding the last intact coals in a 200-kilometer radius and fighting off 3 esches, a pensioner with a trolley, and a surprisingly aggressive staffy. I'm talking seeds. Not the sad little packets you find at Bunnings in the discount section next to the dying basil plants, but heirloom, open-pollinated seeds. The kind humanity used for thousands of years before big agriculture swooped in like a magpie in September and decided everything needed patents. See, most people think growing food is simple. Put seed in dirt, water it, yell at it occasionally, then eat whatever comes out. But if you're relying on modern F1 hybrid seeds, you're setting yourself up for a proper stitch-up. They're bred for one glorious generation big fruit, high yield, disease resistance, and then after that, genetic chaos. You plant the seeds from a hybrid tomato and you'll get something that looks like a science experiment and tastes like wet cardboard. Heirlooms, though they're the real deal, they breed true. Plant them, harvest them, save the seeds, and do it again forever. Infinite food, provided you don't stuff it up through poor selection or letting random plants crossbreed into mutant Franken veggies. Store them properly, too cool, dry, and dark. Seeds are basically tiny sleeping organisms waiting for their big moment, not unlike that mate who only wakes up when the pub yells last call. Heat wakes them prematurely, moisture kills them, and light doesn't help either. Vacuum seal them with desiccant packs, stash them somewhere rodents can't get to, and every couple of years test them, sprout a few on wet paper towel and see who's still kicking. But here's where we bring in the local flavor. Because growing food in Australia isn't the same as in the US or Europe. This continent is a rowdy, sunburnt lizard of a place designed to kill anyone who isn't paying attention. Too much heat, not enough water. Soils that vary from nutrient deficient to actively hostile. If you're starting your apocalypse farm, aim for calorie-dense crops that handle abuse pumpkins, beans, sweet potatoes, corn, and if you're up north, cassava and taro will treat you better than half your family ever did. Ever heard of the Three Sisters method? Indigenous Americans perfected it. Corn grows tall, beans climb the stalks and fix nitrogen. Squash spreads across the ground and keeps weeds down. Australia's got its own versions of companion planting. Ever tried wattle seeds? They're edible, hardy, protein-rich, and grow just about anywhere you don't want them to. Bush Tucker knowledge isn't just quaint cultural trivia, it's survival with an accent. Don't make the rookie mistake of waiting until you're starving to start gardening. That's how you end up taking advice from some half-burnt paperback you found in the ruins of a library and wondering why your tomatoes look like someone insulted them. Gardening requires practice. Real practice. In real dirt. With real failures. Do it now while you can still afford to swear at your compost heap without dying over it. Because once the world ends, you're going to learn very quickly that growing food isn't quaint or therapeutic, it's backbreaking, sun-scorching, sweat-dripping work. But when you finally pull your first proper crop out of that dusty wasteland you call a yard, it'll feel like you've just robbed the universe and gotten away with it. That's the beginning of rebuilding. That's agriculture with stakes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before you start playing Farmer of the Apocalypse, we need to talk about something far more immediate, far more dangerous, and far more likely to end you quicker than dehydration on a 42-degree day. Injuries. Because out here, without hospitals, ambulances, urgent care, or even a mildly uninterested GP, one bad cut turns into a funeral. And trust me, you do not want your legacy to be, he died because he slipped while trying to climb through a broken window and didn't clean the wound properly. That's the kind of embarrassing death people tell campfire stories about to make themselves feel better. So let's get into the trauma kit, the real one. Not the Kmart first aid box with a single band-aid and a pamphlet telling you to apply pressure and remain calm. In the apocalypse, calm is optional. Bleeding out is not. All right, mate. Now we're stepping into the part of survival that separates the sensible from the stupid. Most people think they'll die in the apocalypse from raiders, mutant wildlife, or accidentally eating the wrong berry like some clueless backpacker on their first trip through the Daintree. But now what actually knocks people off is injury. Boring, stupid, preventable injury. The kind of stuff that normally earns you a quick trip to emergency, a tetanus shot, and a lecture from a nurse who's seen far worse before brekkie. But those days are gone. Hospitals? Looted. Pharmacies? Ransacked. Ambulances? Out of diesel, out of service, and probably being used as barricades somewhere. If you get cut, torn open, impaled, crushed, bitten, or anything else the wasteland feels like throwing at you, you're on your own. And out here, one deep wound can put you in the ground faster than a taipan bite. That's why you need a real trauma kit. Not the cutesy little plastic box with a couple of plasters and a rolled bandage that's been sitting in your glove compartment since 2014. A proper, professional, fix the hole before the blood runs out kit. And you'd better know how to use it before things go pear-shaped. Because reading instructions mid-emergency is like trying to learn bush mechanics after your ute has already blown a head gasket in the middle of the Nullarbor tube bloody late. We're talking cat tourniquets, same ones used in military medicine. These things save lives by clamping off catastrophic bleeding. And trust me, once you've seen arterial spray, you'll understand why that matters. Have a second tourniquet too, because redundancy saves lives in a world where nothing works the first time, like trying to start a Hilux with a dodgy starter motor on a frosty morning. And don't forget hemostatic gauze impregnated with kaolin clay. It accelerates clotting like magic. Simple surface area chemistry, but to you, it'll feel like a miracle every time it stops a wound from leaking like a busted esky. You'll want pressure bandages, two proper ones that keep constant compression instead of giving up halfway through like your last relationship. Chest seals? Absolutely. If you get a sucking chest wound, you don't need motivational quotes. You need a sticker that stops your lung from collapsing. Nothing fancy, just the right tool for the job. But here's the part everyone avoids. You must train. You must practice. Because in the real apocalypse, you won't be cool and calm like those action heroes on telly. You'll be sweating, shaking, swearing, panicking, and trying desperately not to faint while your mate bleeds onto your shoes. Stress destroys fine motor skills, and the wasteland does not accept I panicked as an excuse. Take a wilderness first aid course now while those still exist. Make it muscle memory. Make it instinct. Because trying to interpret diagrams while you're losing blood is like trying to read a roadmap during a rollover useless. And then, of course, we get to antibiotics. The tricky bit. The legally gray area. Look, I'm not telling you to break laws. I'm simply saying that infection is one of the fastest, nastiest killers around when modern medical care isn't an option. A cut gets dirty out here. Everything is dust, heat, sweat, grime, and bacteria. A tiny blister from your boots turning bad? That's how you lose a limb, or your life. Sepsis doesn't muck around. If you see red streaks radiating from a wound, fever over 38.5 degrees Celsius, confusion, rapid breathing, you've got hours. Not days, hours. Human-grade antibiotics like amoxicillin, doxycycline, and ciprofloxacin have saved millions of lives. Fish antibiotics, well, let's just say the active ingredients are sometimes identical. Draw whatever conclusions you like. I'm not your mum. And I'm not your lawyer. And while we're on the topic of infection, let's talk reality for Australians. Everything here wants to stab you, bite you, or inject you with something unpleasant. Cuts aren't just cuts, they're invitations for staph infections, tropical bacteria, soil pathogens, and whatever eldritch filth lives under your fingernails. If you're scavenging through rubble, clearing debris, or trying to pry open abandoned fridges, they'll smell like death. Your odds of injury skyrocket. And without proper cleaning, disinfecting, and medical gear, you're done for. But trauma isn't the only killer lurking around the wasteland. While blood loss is quick, dehydration is quicker. Water, or the lack of it, will drop you harder than a swooping magpie on a spring morning. Before you start worrying about bullets and raiders and mutant wildlife, you need to worry about drinking water that won't send you sprinting to the nearest bush with regrets. Because out here, water isn't just life, it's survival, sanity, and currency. And it's about to become the biggest headache you've ever had. Water, the great Australian curse and blessing. Too much of it, and half the country's underwater. Too little, and you're keeling over in the dirt like a backpacker who underestimated Kakadoo's humidity. Out here in the post-apocalypse, water isn't just important, it's the entire game. You can survive without food for weeks. You can survive without sleep for days. But without water? Mate. The outback sun will turn you into beef jerky before you finish complaining about how hot it is. And don't think you can just wander over to the nearest creek, fill your bottle, and call it a day. Untreated water is basically nature's way of telling you to slow down and reconsider your life choices. The moment you gulp down something nasty, Your guts will start a civil war you will absolutely lose. Dysentery isn't glamorous. It's not dramatic. No one writes epic stories about heroes sprinting behind trees every 15 minutes. But it kills. And it kills fast. Dehydration from both ends at once is a particularly humiliating way to check out of the apocalypse. The trick is understanding that water has three enemies: biological, viral, and chemical, and each one requires a different strategy. Think of it like dealing with different types of Australian wildlife. You don't handle a redback the same way you handle a cassowary. One tries to poison you, the other tries to kick your ribcage into the next postcode. Likewise, Giardia and E. coli aren't in the same league as lead contamination or radioactive sludge. Each enemy needs a different solution. Mechanical filtration is your bread and butter. A good 0.1 micron filter will block bacteria and protozoa because they're simply too big to squeeze through. Simple physics doing the heavy lifting. But don't let the marketing fool you, filters don't touch viruses. Viruses are so small, they'll slip through a water filter like a huntsman slipping under your bedroom door at 3 a.m. You need chemicals for those. Chlorine dioxide tablets, iodine drops, the harsh stuff that denatures viral proteins and ruins their day. Follow the proper dosage and wait the full time. Impatience here is just a shortcut to misery. Then there's the nightmare scenario. Chemical contamination. Heavy metals, radioactive particles, industrial runoff, all the stuff that used to be regulated until civilization face-planted. Filters can't handle it, chemicals don't neutralize it, boiling doesn't remove it. The only thing that works is distillation. Turn the water into steam. Catch the steam, drink the clean condensate. It's slow, it's annoying. It requires fuel, but it'll keep you alive. Think of it like fixing a busted radiator hose on the Stewart Highway with duct tape and good intentions, tedious, but necessary. Australians, in particular, need to be paranoid about water. Half our continent is basically a dehydrated wasteland pretending to be a country. Temperatures hit solar surface levels 9 months of the year. Your sweat evaporates before you even notice you're hot. You can lose a liter of water an hour without lifting a finger. Finding good water is a skill. Keeping it drinkable is survival. And then there's the wildlife factor. Crocs. Even after the apocalypse, they'll still be here. They always are. If the world burns to ash, there'll be two things left: cockroaches and saltwater crocodiles. Both thriving, both judging you silently. Don't collect water from croc-infested waterways unless you want to become a statistic in the world's least sympathetic Darwin Award scenario. Once you've got your water sorted, safe, filtered, chemically treated, or distilled, you'd think you're home free. But survival doesn't stop at drinking. It stretches into every part of your day, every scrap of gear, every tool that keeps you alive. And here's the bit people always forget. Tools break. Tools fail. Tools rust, dull, crack, and betray you at the most inconvenient time, usually when you're halfway through something important and cursing loudly enough to scare the birds. Most preppers hoard tools, but forget the tools that maintain the tools. The sharpening stones, files, oils, and gear that keeps everything functional. If your axe is dull, you'll bounce it off a log and into your shin. If your saw teeth are blunt, you'll end up sawing back and forth like an idiot, sweating through your shirt for half an hour before giving up. If your bolts strip and you can't rethread them, every machine you try to fix becomes a very expensive paperweight. That's why you need sharpening stones of multiple grits. Coarse ones for repairing edges after you've smacked your machete into a rock because you weren't watching what you were doing. Fine stones to hone it until it slices through branches like a good insult cuts through a politician's career. Files in all shapes, flat, round, triangular, because metalwork is the backbone of bush mechanics. And taps and dies, those are the real secret weapons. They let you rethread bolt holes, fabricate fasteners, and resurrect gear that would otherwise be landfill. Every abandoned workshop becomes a goldmine if you know how to cut clean threads into salvaged steel. A well-maintained tool lasts years. A neglected one lasts until the next time you really need it, which is usually the exact moment it snaps in half and leaves you swearing at the sky. And once you've mastered the art of keeping your gear alive, it's time to move into something even more valuable: energy. Silent, renewable, dependable energy. Because fuel will run out, engines will die, and generators will reveal your position to anyone within earshot, including the desperate, the dangerous, and the downright deranged. But solar panels? Solar panels don't scream, don't demand petrol, and don't betray you in the middle of the night. We'll get to that. Right then, let's talk power. Not the political kind. We all saw how well that went before everything carked it, but real, usable power. Electricity. Light. The ability to run something more advanced than a candle you found half melted in a drawer. Out here in the wasteland, generators are loud, thirsty, and about as subtle as a drunk bloke yelling at seagulls on Bondi Beach. They drink fuel like a Queenslander at a Sunday sesh. And that fuel, by the way, goes bad faster than milk in the sun. After 18 months, petrol turns into a sticky brown varnish that gums up engines and leaves you standing there like an idiot, yanking a starter cord that absolutely refuses to cooperate. Which is why the future, your future, if you're lucky enough to have one, depends on silent solar power, small panels, 50 to 100 watts each, portable enough to lug around if you need to relocate, tough enough to survive a few knocks, and reliable enough to give you light when everyone else is sitting in the dark arguing about who forgot to ration the candles. Solar panels don't complain. They don't explode. They don't smell like burnt disappointment. They just sit there, quietly converting sunlight into electricity through the photovoltaic effect photons, bouncing around like rowdy footy fans, knocking electrons loose, generating current without a single moving part. They degrade slowly, sure about 0.5% per year, but even in 40 years, they'll still be chugging along at 80% capacity, which is more than you can say for yourself. Pair your panels with deep cycle battery soar. Better yet, lithium iron phosphate cells, and you've got a real system. Something that'll run LED lights, charge radios, power a small water pump, maybe even keep a fan going during a scorcher of an Arvo when the heat feels personal. Add a charge controller so your batteries don't overcharge themselves to death, and suddenly you've got something resembling civilization. Not the fancy no Netflix, no aircon, no toaster, but enough to keep you alive without resorting to firelight like a confused caveman. And speaking of radios, you want communication. Hand crank radios are old school but immortal. 5 watts of output, powered by elbow grease. They'll outlast every battery you own, and they'll never betray you. When the last battery has finally given up the ghost and you're sitting in the dark wondering whether those distant screams were dingoes or something considerably worse, a hand crank radio might be the only thing keeping you informed and therefore alive. But energy alone won't save you. When the internet finally died with a pathetic wheeze, it took every online guide, Wikipedia article, DIY tutorial, and recipe forum with it. Every bit of human knowledge that wasn't written on actual paper disappeared. All those things people swore they'd just Google later, gone forever. Which is why you need a paper library. Real books, dead tree knowledge, the kind that doesn't need charging and can't be wiped out by an EMP or a software update. You need medical manuals that explain how to treat injuries without hospital equipment. Books like Where There Is No Doctor Practical, blunt, and full of the stuff that keeps you alive when modern medicine has become a historical concept. You need farming guides that explain how to rebuild an agricultural system from scratch, not in theory, but in practice. The Foxfire series, those old-school Appalachian skills might just save your hide when you're trying to butcher a roux or build a smokehouse from scrap corrugated iron. Throw in some engineering references, basic chemistry texts, wiring manuals, blacksmithing guides, and anything that teaches skills we all took for granted before society collapsed under its own weight. Because without books, knowledge dies when the last person who carries it dies. And nothing in this wasteland is more fragile than a human life. You need to store those books properly too. Waterproof containers, desiccant packs, somewhere cool and dry. Maybe bury a backup set. Maybe stash one in a mate's bunker. Redundancy is survival. And books, unlike canned beans or ammo, become more valuable the more you use them. They're civilization's respawn button, but while books help you rebuild, they won't fill your belly, fix your broken gear, or fend off someone trying to liberate your supplies at midnight. And with money now worth less than a politician's promise, the world needs a new currency that stood the test of time. So let's talk silver, barter, high-demand commodities, the new economy. Because if the apocalypse has taught us anything, it's this. Everyone needs something, no one has everything, and the only people still pretending cryptocurrency matters are the same ones who thought NFTs were an investment. Money died the same day the world did. The banks went dark, the ATMs spat out their last tenor, and your crypto wallet became as useful as a surfboard in the Simpson Desert. No one's trading Bitcoin for bread, mate. Not when you can't eat a blockchain or shoot it at raiders. But humans still need to barter. We always have. And while the old currency system face-planted harder than a drunk bloke falling off a mechanical bull, some things never stopped having value. Enter silver. Actual, physical, heavy in the hand, silver. Pre-64 coins, 90% silver content. The kind your grandparents accidentally threw in a jar without realizing they were basically hoarding future apocalypse currency. Silver has intrinsic worth that doesn't rely on government backing, it doesn't degrade, and it's bloody hard to fake without someone noticing. A single pre-64 quarter contains real silver, standardized, weighable, tradable. In a world rebuilt around trust and grit, silver becomes the closest thing to real money you'll ever see again. And here's the bit, nobody wants to admit addiction is a powerful economic driver. People will trade everything they own for the things they crave. Coffee, salt, tobacco, alcohol. Doesn't matter if civilization's burned down. Someone out there still wants a morning brew, a smoke, or a stiff drink. Coffee doesn't spoil if stored dry. Salt is basically immortal and was literally used as salary in ancient Rome. Tobacco keeps people calm. And alcohol has medicinal uses: disinfectant, sterilization, painkiller. Let's be honest, just coping with the emotional chaos of the wasteland. These things become bargaining chips, more versatile than silver, sometimes more valuable. With a solid barter stockpile, you can trade for what you missed, lost, or stuffed up. Ran out of antibiotics? Trade. Need new boots? Trade. Need a mechanic to fix the clapped-out motorbike you rescued from the ruins of an industrial estate? Trade. Trade builds networks. Networks build resilience. Resilience builds the foundation for civilization again. But all the trade goods in the world won't help you when someone decides your supplies should be theirs. And that's where ammunition comes in, plus the skill to make more of it when the factory-made stuff runs out. Because it will. Everything that can be looted will be looted, and every bullet you fire is one less you'll ever see again, unless you know how to reload. Primers, powder, projectiles. Brass learned those 4 words like a prayer. Without primers, you're done. They require complex chemistry and precision manufacturing. Stockpile them in the thousands. Blue-collar gold. Gunpowder? That's nitrocellulose-controlled burn rates, tailored for different firearms. Store it cool, dry, and far from open flame unless you want to create a crater where your shed used to be. Bullets you can cast from scrap lead with the right molds. Brass casings? Those little beauties are reusable. Clean them. Resize them. Reprime, repowder, reseat. 10 cycles if you treat them right. Maybe more if you whisper sweet nothings and avoid overcharging loads. Choose common calibers, because if you're scrounging through the ruins and find a rifle, odds are it'll be chambered in something universal. 22 LR for small game and low-risk practice. 9mm for sidearms. 5.56 or 7.62 for rifles. Calibres that existed before the end times, and will outlive them too. Ammunition isn't just for defense. It's for hunting. It's for barter. It's for political leverage. In a lawless world, the person with ammo writes the rules, at least until someone else with better aim comes along. But despite all this gear food, seeds, medical supplies, water systems, tools, solar panels, books, silver, bullets, there is one stockpile more valuable than all the rest combined. One asset that determines whether you live long enough to see a rebuilt world or die alone in the dust like an idiot whose last words were, "I'll be right, mate." People. The human network, the ultimate resource of any civilization. Apocalypse or not. The lone wolf fantasy? Rubbish. A solo survivor is just someone waiting to die of infection, exhaustion, or poor decision-making. One broken leg, one infected wound, one bad night, and it's lights out. The wasteland doesn't care how tough you think you are. It doesn't care about your ego, your survivalist fantasies, or your handcrafted bunker filled with 2 years of tinned tuna. Without people skilled, reliable, cooperative people, you're toast. Dry toast. Civilization is built by groups. By welders who know how to turn junk metal into usable tools. By medics who can stop bleeding and set fractures. By mechanics who can resurrect an engine that should have been dead 20 years ago. By farmers who know how to coax life out of terrible soil. By teachers who pass on knowledge so the next generation doesn't have to discover everything the hard way. Every person multiplies your capability. Add one skilled individual, and your survival odds skyrocket. Add several, And suddenly you've got the beginnings of a community, something stronger than any bunker, any stockpile, any weapon. But community isn't easy. Trust is expensive. People bring conflict, unpredictability, and the occasional idiot who eats your food stores because he thought use-by date meant nothing after the apocalypse. Governance matters. Fairness matters. Accountability matters. Because groups fracture fast when resources get tight and tempers flare like a summer bushfire. The key is building your network before everything collapses, while trust still means something and relationships aren't just transactional. Develop skills that others need. Offer more than you take. Become indispensable. Avoid the drongos. Find the capable ones. The steady ones. The ones who don't crack under pressure or burst into tears because the kettle stopped working. Redundancy matters too. One person with medical skill is a blessing. 3 is a sustainable system. One mechanic is hope. One mechanic who trains apprentices, that's a future. You can lose your tools, your rice, your solar panels, your books, everything. Lightning strike, raiders, accident, fire, flood, whatever. But if you've built a strong human network, you can rebuild every bit of it from scratch. Because people are the only resource that grows, learns, adapts, and multiplies. The only resource capable of creating civilization out of chaos. And that, mate, that's your real stockpile. So here we are, standing in the dust and echo of a world that used to function, or at least pretend to. The skyscrapers are hollowed-out husks, the suburbs are a patchwork of burnt-out shells and stubborn survivors, and the highways look like a Mad Max casting call gone wrong. 3 days in, the adrenaline's wearing off, and reality's settling over you like the heat haze on a long stretch of outback road. And now you've heard the 10 stockpiles, the real, one's the gear that keeps you fed, upright, patched together, hydrated, armed, illuminated, educated, connected, and part of something bigger than your own stubborn heartbeat. But here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The end of the world wasn't the hard bit. The hard bit is what comes next. Rebuilding. Pushing forward. Carrying the weight of survival past the point where it's exciting, past the point where it's novel, past the point where your brain still pretends this is some wild adventure and not your new, dusty, exhausting, magpie-swooping reality. You've stockpiled your rice and beans, your calorie fortress, and when times get truly dire, that hidden stash will keep you from turning into skeleton decor. You've got your heirloom seeds, your shot at agriculture, your chance to build a sustainable food system instead of playing supermarket scavenger until the shelves turn to dust. You've got a trauma kit that might actually keep your limbs attached when you inevitably do something stupid or heroic or both. You've got water purification sorted, the trinity, that protects your guts from becoming a biological war zone. Your tools are sharpened, maintained, repaired, and ready. Because you know entropy never sleeps. Your solar setup hums away silently, giving you just enough light to keep from going feral. Your books, those precious pages of instructions, diagrams, and forgotten wisdom sit ready to teach you anything your brain hasn't memorized. You've got silver to trade, goods to barter, ammo to protect, and the know-how to restock your own magazines like civilization depends on it. But none of that works without people. Not for long. Not for the years it'll take to claw our way back from the brink. You've heard it before, but maybe it hits different now. No one survives alone. Not forever. Even the toughest lone wolf bushman eventually needs someone to watch their back, check their wounds, or just hold the other end of a bloody tarp when the wind's howling like a banshee. A community isn't a luxury, it's structural reinforcement for civilization itself. And that's the truth that stings the most. Because people are messy, unpredictable, emotional. Some of them are as useful as a mesh door on a submarine. Some want leadership but crack under pressure. Some talk tough but turn to jelly at the first sight of real danger. But find the right ones, the welders, the medics, the farmers, the mechanics, the steady-handed, the level-headed, the fair dinkum survivors who give more than they take, and suddenly the world doesn't feel quite so doomed anymore. This is the part where most blowhards and prepper videos ask, "Are you ready?" As if readiness is a fixed state. It's not. Readiness is a moving target, a constant grind, a daily decision to not roll over and die. But I'll ask anyway, how ready are you really? Do you have the gear, the knowledge, the skills, and the people? Or are you standing there in thongs, holding a half-empty water bottle, hoping the end times come with a pause button? Because the next crisis isn't a hypothetical anymore. Could be economic collapse. Could be war. Could be a pandemic worse than the last one. Could be climate chaos pushing whole regions into oblivion. Doesn't matter what starts the fire, what matters is that you've packed a fire extinguisher, a plan, and several mates who don't panic under pressure. In this sunburnt wasteland we call home, survival isn't about luck, it's about stubborn preparation mixed with a healthy disrespect for danger. The prepared rebuild, the unprepared beg. And the ones who ride the apocalypse out with a grin and a shovel, those are the settlers of the new world. So think hard. What did we miss? What would you add? What's the most critical stockpile in your book? Drop your thoughts, your arguments, your wild theories, and your insults if you must. I'll be here, stockpiling knowledge, patching up broken gear, and preparing for whatever fresh hell the universe decides to fling at us next. Because it's not if anymore, mate, it's when. And when it hits, I'll see you out there either wandering the wasteland or helping build the new world rising from the ashes. Your choice, your preparation, your future. Make it count.